welcome to BALLBUSTERS Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth debate. If you'd like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live. There's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Joining me this evening on this special BALLBUSTERS is Adam Meakin, Quantum Eraser, Betty Van Velsen and Paula, otherwise known as Bible Literalist. Very good to have you all.
Hello, thanks.
Hello, good evening.
Evening, everyone.
Ahoy hoy.
Hello, hello, hello. So today's topic of discussion will be evolution. We will reference a few other people from Non Sequitur along the way, but this is hopefully going to be a very well received show. I know it's been heavily advertised, so thank you to all of you who are joining us in this live stream. Who wants to kick off the first evolution related subject? Looking at you, Paula.
Oh, I'm kicking it off?
Yeah, if you want to start us off with your comments.
You're presenting.
Oh, okay.
Didn't you know?
This is your
Surprise.
show. You're in charge here now. It's all down to you now.
I'll give you a second if you want, Paula, just to gather yourself. But for me, we covered it last night on Iron Realm, and as Nathan says, it is anticipated because I'm really interested in. John's given me a little bit of reading to do, but I'm very interested in what he's going to present and how he's going to dissect it, more importantly. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, for me, this is one of my early studies and conspiracy theories, if you will, because as a young Earth creationist since my teens, that's a long time ago. So this is something I've been familiar with for quite a long time, and I really haven't seen anything new since then. So this ought to be fairly straightforward, I think.
Betty, got a few introductory comments?
Yeah, well, when I was young, I thought about evolution. Well, when they taught it at school, I thought, okay, are apes my ancestors? And I couldn't believe it. But you take it as it being presented. But if you go into it much deeper, then you know that it can't be. So that's my background. So I went into that rabbit hole pretty quick too. So, and yeah, it's for me it's a story, but hopefully that will be presented tonight too. So
Hopefully so. Shout out to Chow Yun Cat, getting some love, Paula. Paula on the panel. Go Paula, woo!
I got me a cheerleader.
Indeed.
Well, that was a great presentation. Well, we'll see you later, folks.
Thanks, that's all. And with that, I will say a huge... No, I'm only joking. So do you want to kick off the presentation proper, John? Do you want me to present you?
Yeah. Tell me when it's up.
Yeah, we're ready to go.
Yeah, I thought I'd start off because we may have some new people here and they could be asking themselves, well, why evolution? Isn't this a flat Earth channel? What does this have to do with flat Earth? Well, we did Big Bang last week and now evolution, right? Well, number one, we're here to expose pseudoscience pretender clowns. And number two, all of it's connected right by the lips. It all stems from no God, Big Bang, ever-expanding, inflating universe, 2 trillion galaxies. Now, that's just in the observable universe now, right? And then combined with evolution, these things are connected by the lips, folks. Near its base, the heliocentric reification model. And you think this is all random, right? Don't sell these pseudoscientists pre-short. They have a goal. And I'm not talking about the hordes of knuckle-dragging parroters. I'm speaking about the pontiff hierarchy. And they've been at it for much longer than 500 years. This fairy tale of epic proportions that you're dealing with today is particularly insidious. The pseudoscience clergy know that the majority of people have taken at least an intro to biology course 25 years ago. And that little bit of knowledge from the deep, dark past combined with pride, the never-ending public parade of pseudoscience biologists, and a worldview that would make Mr. Magoo blush, it's a very dangerous thing. So what we're going to do, we're going to eviscerate this disheveled monkey. Okay? That's our mission here today. So the undisputed smoke and mirrors shapeshifter of all time, bar none, may I present to you fairy tale evolution. I mean, this thing is a cluster gaggle. But this is what I do. Ever since I come out here 10, 12 years ago, I said, what's going on? Everyone talking about evolution this and evolution that. I'm sitting there, well, let's get down to basics. So I asked these painfully excruciating questions to everyone. I don't care who you are. You're a PhD, molecular biologist, cellular biologist, or Joe Coffey. You're getting these questions put to you. And here they are. They're quite simple. Evolution, what's that? Then number 1, define evolution. Number 2, post the scientific theory of evolution. Number 3, post the formal scientific hypotheses and experiments that concretize it into a real scientific theory. And number 4, highlight the independent variables used in the test. Listen, these are basic, reasonable questions, folks. I'll tell you what, you want to send these people off the reservation, ask these questions. I don't care who they are. Just post these questions to them. You'll get called so many names it'll make a billy goat puke. That's when you know, see, that's a tell, right? That they're clueless and they're emotionally tied to this fairy tale religion. You're never going to get to these, number 3 and number 4. Why? Because they can't answer question number 2, right? I just stick with the first 2 questions. We never get down here. They try to go here, but I don't let them because you can't get there without answering number 2. And you can't get to number 2 without answering number 1, define evolution. Like I said, nobody in 12 years from Joe Coffey to Betty Breadmaker to anyone from the hallowed halls of quackademia has answered any of them. None. Why? Well, they don't exist. These do not exist. That's why they can't answer them. So I just put the screws to them. So the clown community answered these questions. Okay? They can't. I'm just teasing them. So after this, most of this presentation is going to focus on these 2 questions. But first, we're going to have the evolutionary Rhodes Scholar, Steve McClown and the Clan McClowns, and Aaron Ra go ahead and kick this thing off. So, Nathan, go ahead.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
As a
and
matter
you
of
said they
fact,
can't explain any
there-
scientific
there
law,
are
but we
there are
actually
many
do have
evolutionary
a number
theories.
of scientific laws
Excuse me,
that
sir.
specifically
Your
apply only to evolution.
Okay, so your screen's back up.
So, rare and blah. We actually do have a number of scientific laws that specifically apply to evolution. Oh, really? Have you heard of Ernst Mayr by chance? Professor Emeritus, Museum of Comparative Zoology at Harvard University. From Stephen Jay Gould, Ernst Mayr, the world's greatest living evolutionary biologist. Let's listen to this, folks. We're going to circle back to this thing. Listen closely. Darwin introduced historicity into science. Evolutionary biology, in contrast with physics and chemistry, is a historical science. The evolutionist attempts to explain events and processes that have already taken place. Listen up. Laws and experiments are inappropriate techniques for the explication of such events and processes. Instead, one constructs a historical narrative consisting of a tentative reconstruction of the particular scenario that led to the events one is trying to explain. This should shock you, folks. Let's go through. We're going to circle back here. So, Darwin introduced historicity into science. What's that? Historicity? Does he have a time machine or something? I don't know. Evolutionary biology. In contrast, remember all the presentations I start with denoting the pseudosciences versus the actual sciences? See, Ernst did it here for me with evolutionary biology because he's contrasting. It's a juxtaposition with the actual sciences, physics and chemistry, right? The evolutionist attempts to explain events and processes that have already taken place. What's that? That's a rhetorical question. This is the big one. As per Aaron Raw, they have a number of scientific laws that specifically apply, right? Only to evolution. Not according to Ernst Mayr, the world's greatest living evolutionary biologist, Aaron Blah. He says laws and experiments are inappropriate techniques for the application or explication of such events and processes. This is science. Experiments. There's no experiments. Unbelievable. And here's the last one. Instead, one constructs a historical narrative consisting of a tentative reconstruction of the particular scenario that led to events one is trying to explain. Right? So that's great. Aren't science without experiments? They are inappropriate. Must be a new type of science. So, welcome to the pseudoscience fairy tale, an argument from complete ignorance fallacy, just so story, historical narrative, and a cherry on top begging the question fallacy on nuclear steroids. This statement. One constructs a historical narrative consisting of a tentative reconstruction of the particular scenario that led to the events one is trying to explain. That's textbook circular reasoning, folks. And how can you have a real scientific theory without experimental test when, from chemistry about, a scientific theory summarizes a hypothesis or group of hypotheses that have been supported with repeated testing? From quarks to quasars, a scientific theory consists of one or more hypotheses that have been supported with repeated testing. From the University of Rochester physics labs, a scientific theory represents a hypothesis or group of related hypotheses which has been confirmed through repeated experimental tests. So again, how can you have a theory that doesn't have any experimental tests? And there have never been and never will be scientific laws. It's a misnomer. We went over this in previous presentations. Go look at the scientist or science presentation, right? I explained this in great detail. All we have are natural laws. These natural laws never, ever, ever enter the scientific method. There is no cause and effect with the laws, right? An easy example, what's the cause of entropy, i.e. the second law of thermodynamics? It's a moronic question. So let's stop here. Any comments?
So are you trying to say there's no scientific evidence for evolution?
Yeah.
So
No, there's not only no scientific evidence. There's no science in this whatsoever. Go ahead.
It was a leading gag that I thought maybe Adam would pick up on. There's a
Well,
scene
I was about to just say, John, just scroll up to the start. I think, to be fair to them, they do add that disclaimer in. There you go. They do say, there. You're quite clear with regards to it's not applicable. So they're honest that at least experiments aren't, because we haven't got time machines or hundreds of years to do these things in.
No, Ernst Mayer's honest. not them. When you said them, no, they're not honest. Ernst Mayr was honest here, right? But not them, the evolutionists. What do we hear? Evolution is the most validated scientific theory in the history of man, right? Sorry, go ahead.
The point was the opening is historical science. That was my only point of raising an eyebrow, not something that I've put together.
What's historical science?
Just the line below, beginning of the line below, John. In contrast with physics and chemistry, is a historical science. Yeah. That was the bit that just maybe raised an eyebrow. To quote John, I think, is it married bachelor?
Yeah. It's a conjured married bachelor.
But other than that, then the bit I did agree with, fair play. I thought it was a bit of a disclaimer. It's critique, obviously, but yeah, that was my input.
Yeah, it's not historic science, it's just a pseudoscience. It's not applicable. It's not applying the application of the scientific method in any way, shape or form. It's a declaration. That's the main point of the opening. What do we hear from them? Well, it's scientifically valid. There's loads of scientific evidence for evolution. No, there isn't. What they call historic evidence. Usually, well, I'm not going to say usually. I'm going to assume that we get a lot of denying the antecedent in terms of them formulating their claimed scientific evidence. Am I wrong?
No, it's a lot of affirming the consequent form of logical fallacies. Denying the antecedent is a specialized one, save for their fairy tale geologic column.
Oh, okay. It's a specific branch of it that they're using, that particular logical fallacy. Probably won't come to it in this show.
Yeah, well, you can see the parallels, right, between flat Earth because they're starting out, or spherical Earth because they're starting out with something that doesn't exist, evolution, right? So you know it's gonna be an affirming the consequent every single time.
Right.
Yeah, but they say that they observe something. They say that they observe these bones in the ground, and then they extrapolate basically a story out of that, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's not a phenomenon.
They say that they observe something,
Well,
and that
that's
they
not.
ask the question, right?
That's not a phenomenon, though. That's a concrete noun.
Yeah, yeah.
So can I have a bash? So if evolution, then we will see reduced size bones in human skeletons. We do see reduced size bones in human skeletons, therefore evolution. How's that?
Don't hurt yourself. We're gonna get to it. I'll show you. It's in here.
So we're pretty much talking about forensics again, where we're looking at present evidence to try to piece together a story and come up with a probability is the best we can do. And that is not hard science. It never was. It's how people try to figure out who committed a crime, for example. And when it parades as a scientific theory, it has to be falsifiable and it can't be done. I've seen quotes, I don't have them right in front of me, that basically, if they find anything such as the oxymoron living fossils or anything else they would ever find, would they abandon the theory as you should do in science? And they say no. So they're going to bypass it like Scotty on the Enterprise until, you can't even see the original thing anymore because it's been changed and changed and changed and changed. And they're proud of this because they say that's science. It's always changing. No, this is self-contradiction and not following your own rules on what a scientific theory is, because you're supposed to be able to come up with an experiment to falsify it. And it's impossible when they refuse to let go.
So what you're saying is correlation is not causation, even though they're asserting definitive cause and effect relationships when they use the word science.
Yeah, and they keep moving the goalpost continually, because if we say, well, we're going to expect this certain result from this certain test on something and then make up a story to explain it, and then it doesn't turn out the way they wanted, so they'll just brush that aside and think, well, we'll figure it out eventually. So you have to have faith in the future of what they might discover that'll solve their problem for them.
Yeah,
So
dealing with
it's
zealots.
not falsifiable.
Zealots, that's the word.
Yes.
Any more? Or should we move on?
If you do move on, go ahead and play from 114.57 and stop at 1:16:16. Try to listen close, folks. It's going to be hard. Don't worry about it because I painstakingly wrote everything down. So we're going to go through this step by step.
So,
We have to-
yeah,
so,
we
okay,
can.
so hang on,
Dave,
hang on, you guys are talking over each other now. You guys are talking over
Yes,
each other
we have to
now.
let
Hang
him
on.
finish.
So, yeah, so Dr. McNerney, what are the two? What are different types? I only know one scientific. Honestly, if you can tell me another one, I'll be appreciative. I only know one scientific theory. Let me finish.
Equilibrium would be an
I
alternative to
Let him answer the
Darwinian. That's just two.
I have to get the
The fact
question
of the
out.
matter is, you asked me how many, and I would tell you this: there are as many different theories of evolution as there are evolutionists.
Can
No
you
two
tell
of
us
them
some,
agree on
please?
exactly how it happened.
Can you tell us some? Can you give me the name? I'm being honest with you. I only know one scientific theory of evolution. It is called modern evolutionary synthesis combined with descent with modification. That's the only one that I'm aware of. If Aaron knows another one, then I'll be impressed and I will go, okay,
Yeah,
Aaron, you're right.
It's now. It started with Darwinism, then became. It started with Darwinism, and then became the Mendelo-Darwinian synthesis, and it's gone to another stage past that, and is now the extended evolutionary hypothesis.
Which is the same thing as modern evolution synthesis combined with descent with modification.
Exactly.
That's the extended modern synthesis. And you
And I
define
certainly-
So there's
evo,
one
devo,
and only
epigenetics.
one theory of evolution.
Right. And you would obviously include epigenetics and evo devo in that extended synthesis.
Exactly, of
that's
course.
the one. Right. Okay. So
Okay.
So did you catch all that? Let me know when it's up.
Yeah, you're up.
So, yeah, we're going to go through this. So, rare and blah. Number one, it started with Darwinism, then became the Mendelo-Darwinian synthesis. Then it's gone to another stage past that. Yeah, which one, please? Then is now the extended evolutionary hypothesis. So let's tear this apart. Started with Darwinism. Charles Darwin never postulated a single scientific hypothesis in his friggin' life, let alone establish a scientific theory. Number two, it's gone to another stage past that. Yep, that no-named other stage, eh? I know, let's just make some shit up. Number three, extended evolutionary hypothesis. This thing doesn't exist. And the extended evolutionary synthesis is not extended evolutionary hypothesis because a hypothesis is not a synthesis. Moreover, a hypothesis or synthesis is not a scientific theory, for crying out loud. Now, this cluster gaggle. Let's go through. I'm going to go through it once. I'm going to circle back. So, Steve McClown, I only know one scientific theory of evolution. It's called modern evolutionary synthesis combined with descent with modification. If Aaron knows another one, then I'll be impressed. Rare and blah, it's now the extended evolutionary hypothesis. Steve McClown, which, okay, is the same thing as modern evolutionary synthesis combined with descent with modification. Rare and blah, exactly. There's one and only one theory of evolution. Steve McClown, that's the extended modern evolutionary synthesis. You would obviously include epigenetics and evo devo in that extended synthesis. Rare and blah, exactly, of course. Steve McClown, that's the one, right? So let's go through this. Let's see if there's one and only one here. Let's see how many we can count. So we got the modern evolutionary synthesis, descent with modification, extended evolutionary hypothesis. So we got three. Of course, they say it's one and only one. Then we got extended modern evolutionary synthesis. That's four. Then epigenetics and evo devo, 5, 6. So my first question is define one. Clowns. Friggin' Elmer Fudd and all these rope-a-dope are blushing. And wasn't it funny? Rare and blah was holding up two fingers while Steve McClown is saying there's only one scientific theory. Number two, Steve McClown's modern evolutionary synthesis. Pay attention to these words, folks, because words mean things. Has been falsified. From Dennis Noble, physiology is rocking the foundations of evolutionary biology in experimental physiology. Let's see what he has to say here. In this article, I will show that all the central assumptions of modern synthesis, also called neo-Darwinism, have been disproved. Moreover, they have been disproved in ways that raise the tantalizing prospect of a totally new synthesis, a shapeshifter. That's my addition. One that would allow a reintegration of the physiological science and evolutionary with the evolutionary biology. So your modern synthesis is, I don't know if, number one, I don't know how you disprove a non-existent fairy tale, but he did it, Dennis Noble. So there goes that one. Next, Steve McClown's descent with modification that he incoherently attached to the now debunked modern synthesis isn't a scientific theory in itself is debunked. So descent with modification, this is just code word for ancestry, common descent, phylogenetic tree. Basically universal common descent or the tree of life. Wonder where they got this from. A, if ancestry is not assumed from similarities, then there is no correlation between similarities and ancestry. Ergo, to make the argument, you need to make that assumption. That is, it's a begging the question fallacy. Number two, all they have is a textbook affirming the consequent formal logical fallacy. Here it is. If P, then Q, Q, therefore P. If evolution is true, P, then insert any Darwinian grab bag post hoc observation, fossils, homology, similarity, genetic variation, and others, Q. We observe post hoc observation, Q. Therefore, evolution is true. Therefore, P. Or, specifically to our topic, if common ancestry is true, P, we will observe similarities, Q. We observe similarities, Q. Therefore, common ancestry is true. Therefore, P. The logical fallacy is that P doesn't necessarily follow from Q. For example, if I had just eaten a whole pizza, P, I would feel very full. Q. I feel very full. Q. Therefore, I've just eaten a whole pizza. Therefore, P. Couldn't I have eaten a 20-ounce ribeye with fries or the old 96er? Let's put this quackery out of its misery quick, just in case it wasn't clobbered by the above. Check this out. Dr. Craig Venter, atheist evolutionist, the grand poobah of geneticists, the geneticist of geneticists, in front of God and everybody, about 1,500 people in the auditorium, comes out with this. There is no tree of life. It's an artifact from early scientific studies that aren't holding up. So there is not a tree of life. The audience gasped. Dawkins and Krauss turned different shades of green, along with the Nobel Prize winners on the panel. He's like E.F. Hutton. When he talks, people listen. You hear that sound? That's the common descent fairy tale carousel tree circling the drain at light speed, as if he actually needed to say it. Even with DNA, this is from Takata, Genetic Perspective on the Origin of the History of Humans, in the Annual Review of Ecology and Systematics. Even with DNA sequence data, we have no direct access to the process of evolution, whatever that is. So the objective reconstruction of the vanished past can be achieved only by what? Creative imagination, folks. That's all they got. Number 4, and again, there's no such animal as the extended evolutionary hypothesis. And the hypothesis isn't a scientific theory. Number 5, there's no such animal as Steve McClown's extended modern evolutionary synthesis. What he did was he just incoherently slapped these two things together. Watch. From their alma mater wiki, the extended evolutionary synthesis consists of a set of theoretical concepts argued to be more comprehensive than the modern synthesis. You see, they're juxtaposed. Even on the extended evolutionary synthesis's website, they have a whole paper on this. The title, How the Extended Evolutionary Synthesis Differs from the Modern Synthesis. So this is a joke. He just made this shit up. All right. So let's summarize. So what do we got for the one and only one scientific theory of evolution? Number 1, the modern synthesis. Well, I debunked that, and it's not a scientific theory. Descent with modification just got debunked and not a scientific theory. Extended evolutionary hypothesis never existed, and a hypothesis isn't a scientific theory. By the way. Number 4, extended modern evolutionary synthesis never existed. Like I said, he just made it up from the above by combining these two. Clowns. They incoherently stuck it together, and it's not a scientific theory anyway. Epigenetics is not the scientific theory of evolution. And number 6, Evo Devo is not the scientific theory of evolution. So this is just one big cluster gaggle. So in the dishonorable mention, the extended evolutionary synthesis, which Beavis and Butthead didn't bring up, consists of theoretical concepts like I just showed you. Theoretical concepts are not scientific theories. Comments, questions?
Do we get to the actual science that they use at some stage, though?
Say that again.
Do we ever get to a stage where they have anything that they can even derive from something that is scientific at all?
No. No, zero.
What about claimed experiments then? Do they have anything that's claimed to be an experiment like Cavendish?
Well, they can't get there because they can't get past the first 2 questions. No.
Oh, so yeah, I mean that slips by a lot of people when I've seen you discussing this. You'll say, "Well, what's evolution?" And most people don't appreciate the gravitas of that question.
Yeah, but they can predict, can they? They can predict, and then they find these that what they predict they find in the ground afterwards. How can that be?
So they can predict, huh? Keep that in mind. Well, we're going to get to that topic. Just keep that in mind. You can move on. But remember that prediction.
Yeah.
They can predict what they can find in the ground, Betty. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, go on.
I just wanted you to expand on that point. So you're saying they can predict specifically.
Oh, they can predict. Oh, yeah. Well, they say that they predicted a couple of fossils that they would find later on in layers and stuff, and then they say that this is the explanation between that species and that species. So this evolved from that to the other, and because they found a sort of intermediate, I think, or something. I don't know.
I see. So they kind of say if evolution exists, then you'll find these certain bones in these specific layers, and they do find those specific bones in those specific layers. So obviously, evolution exists, right?
Yeah, you have that with these birds, I believe, that because they now say that the dinosaurs evolved into birds, and now you have these. I think it's all these names, Australopithecus, whatever. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Archaeopteryx.
Hold on, let's get it through. Hold on.
Archaeopteryx?
Let's get it through once.
Archaeopteryx,
Hold on. Paula, can you say it just once clearly? Because I didn't get it either.
Archaeopteryx.
Archaeopteryx.
Yeah, it's a difficult name. And that's a sort of an in-between bird because it had 4 wings, I believe, also on his hind legs or something. And they found these fossils. Often they tend to be fake, by the way, because they find them in China of all places, and these Chinese are really good at making stuff, I think. So
well, they don't. Nobody has a very good track record on predicting anyway. We all remember the coelacanth, which was held to be a transitional fossil that it was this fish with extra appendages, so it seemed, from the imprints in the rocks, and then they find one caught by a fisherman. They find living ones. They find them all the time now. And so they made up the term living fossil, which is an oxymoron, because it just means, that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Well, it's still alive. It's a fossil, but it's still alive. It's just desperation. Yeah. That's all it is.
And they say, well, one day a fish decided to go on land and try to live there. And because you have these fishes that are able to go on land. But for me, they were just designed that way because suppose that I would want to live in sea, so I go to sea and then I suddenly develop flippers and go swimming.
Yeah, I heard.
How is that going to be?
I watched a science show and I just sat there and laughed because at one point they're like, look at these polar bears. They go in the water a lot. They want to go back to the sea like they came from. And then later they're like, look at these dolphins. They beach themselves trying to get these certain little fish that go up on the shore. they're trying to grow legs. It's just, they were saying this with a straight face, and I'm like, you have got to be kidding me.
Well, they always die when they are beached, right? Because they can't go back into the sea. These orca whales and all that, these beach whales, they can't go back.
Yeah, and they beach for all sorts of other reasons too, but some of them do at certain times of the year. Certain other fish are in the shallow waters and they get stuck a lot of times, but they're not trying to get out of the water. They're trying to catch food and get back in because they know they'll die if they stay there.
I stuck that in the, did you see in the advert, I stuck in the, what are they called, lemmings. Shout out to Tina Baker for the super chat. Thank you very much indeed for your support, by the way. I put them in jumping off cliffs and then, growing wings and stuff and going on gliders, because exactly they're trying to figure out how to fly when they jump off the cliffs. They're hoping they'll grow wings on the way down.
Yeah, I heard a boy and at school say to a teacher one day, well, if these dinosaurs were running and then because they have to be developed into flying beings because they want to flee from predators. I mean, these guys would all be dead before they would have sprouted wings.
Right, you have to have failed trials, and how does that pass on genes to the next? Because if you killed yourself trying, it's just like there's this documentary called Animals That Defy Evolution. The giraffes, supposedly giraffes got long necks from stretching up to the high leads, right? But the problem is that when you have that long of a neck, you have to have a system in place so that when the giraffe bends down to drink, it doesn't blow its brains out with blood pressure that it has to have when it's standing upright. So there's this little sponge-like device in the brain, in the head, that absorbs the blood until the pressure can lower while it drinks. And then when it lifts its head back up, it would pass out, except that sponge squeezes and releases the blood to wait for the pressure to catch up. It's impossible to do trial and error with that.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do you have to try that?
They have to have a certain heart, I think, also to pump the blood through the veins and stuff, I think.
It's very strong, yeah. I mean, it has a long way to go.
Yeah, so they're particularly designed to do that function, I think. But yeah, it's funny. Stories, I like that's good bedtime stories, I guess, right?
Comedy.
Yeah.
You've been very quiet, Adam. We heard lots of medical sounding terms in that last presentation. I thought we'd hear lots from you.
I was in the bit that got me again was number 2. So descent with modification. And that this, I thought it was quite significant. I'm not sure how John described some granddaddy of genetics. Describes it basically as a joke, a defunct theory, and he's kind of ridiculing. Is this the evolutionary tree of life, John? That's what I wanted to kind of ask. Is that the
the phylogenetic tree? Yes, correct.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's interesting. But yeah.
Can you explain what epigenetic information is?
No, can you?
No.
Just peel apart the word, right? So you got epi means around or over, right? So epigenetics speaks to changes in expression without changing the primary structure. In other words, changes in expressions of genes without changing the sequence.
Okay, that was kind of consistent.
So it goes along with histone modification. It will go down a rabbit trail here. Don't worry about it. It's not, it's not relevant.
It's not scientifically valid.
No, I didn't say it wasn't scientifically valid. I'm saying that it has nothing to do with fairy tale evolution, whatever that is.
Is it? I don't know. What's a good example?
Yeah, there's some good examples of that with
eye color, won't be.
No, they did it with.
So maybe I can pose it as a question because it kind of links to what I asked earlier. So, epigenetics is scientifically valid?
Yes.
Well, so this is an example of that then. So it's something that they attribute through.
No. They just state the word epigenetics and combine it with their little fairy tale. This has nothing to do with evolution right here. Nothing. Zero. Because you know why? Define evolution. We're going to get to that.
Okay.
I think if you're thinking in terms of Darwin's finches, you'd probably say it's a slight change in the beak shape, as opposed to it suddenly not having a beak and having a nasal passage like we have. That would be what's epigenetics is just a slight change in the beak change. So a slight alteration in the gene coding. I'm pulling this from Google, as opposed to the alteration of the genetic code itself. So an alteration that the creature has a beak or it has a palate, like we have, sort of thing.
They did an experiment back in the day. Like I said, I'm trying to recall it. It was with these fat mice. I don't know whether they were mice or not, and they changed their diet, right? And what happened was that the histones got methylated, and they passed these genes off to their offspring, and these the offspring mice didn't have any diabetes. They weren't fat. They were all healthy. So there was no changes in the structure of DNA. It was just epigenetic changes. So there you go.
Okay, so we're not talking about mutations or anything along
Correct.
that line. It's just a sort of selective coding with the original information, right?
Yeah, there's no changes in the sequence of the DNA. To express genes, you have to be able, because it's wrapped around histones. They're chromatin domains. See, we're going to go down a road here that we're going to get everyone lost. Basically, the messenger or RNA polymerase can't get in there to copy the code because of these structural changes that happen with the histones. So let's not worry about it. Well, that's a rabbit trail we don't need to go down.
Well, to round that out, if nothing else, if they're attributing evolution to these scientific terms, in some way I want to demonstrate that you actually understand what these terms mean for you to decry any sort of association with the fairy tale evolution. Now, you immediately brushed it to one side by saying, well, what is evolution? Which is always going to be the best way to attack this head on, right? But I wanted to make it clear that you do actually know what you're talking about. I know you do, but there might be audience members that don't. That just say, well, he's just hand-waved dismissed that, has he not? Well, no. Moving on.
I thought you were trying to provoke me.
Not at all.
No, just kidding, man. Yeah, and he just said it right off the cuff. He goes, well, epigenetics and evo-devo, right? Well, I could just pop up words too. And, he didn't discuss it. He doesn't know what it means. Obviously, look at all the things that they just made up, right? They're combining things. They're just making shit up. So there you go.
Any more on this bit, or should we move on?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an analogy, and I suppose it says here, look, the Greek prefix epi, over, outside, or around, and I suppose it's a bit like getting yourself a nice XR3i. And they're all XR3Is, but the epigenetics of it is how you pimp your ride. You've not changed it into an escort. Still, you know what I mean? Or it's still an escort, do you know what I mean? You've not changed it into a different car, but there is a slight variation within that same genetic code. You might bore it out, you might add different lights, you might add different things, but they're kind of trim, I think, around it's
okay. So if I expand on your analogy, if I was to say that the color choices of a car are similar to the color that you might have your hair grow, and the one particular color being more reflective is beneficial in a particular climate, but it was always a choice of color available on the palette. But the fact that you've had that choice and it's benefited you isn't evolution, because nothing's actually evolved. It's just selected a particular color and it's worked out well.
Yeah, I don't know. Would you agree with that, John? Or Betty?
Yeah, I've heard about sheep that were fed, for example, meat instead of vegetables and stuff, or the grass. And then they later investigated how long their intestines were, for example. And they found out that when these animals ate meat, it would have these intestines would have been shorter. So they adapted. But how that's more than in a something that it's genetic that they are able to do. It's not evolving. Because if you feed them grass again, then these intestines will eventually be longer again. So they adapt, and that's the beauty of it. We have these cells that can adapt to certain circumstances, but within what you are, within the kind that you are, the species. Not you don't suddenly turn into a pigeon or whatever. It can't happen.
Be careful with that species term. That's one thing I didn't get into in this presentation. I don't feel the need to. You're going to see why, but I would be careful with man-made conventions.
Yeah, that's why I said also kind, because kind and species. That's also the discussion between creationists and evolutionists, I believe.
False dichotomy.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we may or may not get into those particular concepts, constructs, whatever. What did you call them? I always fish this word. You said it a moment ago. Convention.
Yep, that's what they are. Human conventions. Be careful of those. They try to fool you with them.
Yeah.
Okay, you're back on screen.
All right, we ready?
I think so.
So, since an actual scientific theory of evolution is non-existent, that is, it has never and will never exist, making it a stone cold fairy tale, let's see if we can at least define the old nag, right? So, all the following definitions, unless I specify otherwise, all the following citations come from the National Center for Science Education, right? Let's take a look at this. So you're saying, well, I want the definition for evolution, right? So you punch this up, defining evolution. So let's see what we got here. You ready? Still going.
Can we have a break?
You see where we're going here? Oh my God, we get Encyclopedia Britannica just looking for a simple definition, right? Usually definitions are 1-2 sentences max. What do we get here? Encyclopedia Britannica. I'll tell you what, folks, if this doesn't tell you that this is cod swallow horsepucky, I don't know what does. So, like I said, I'm going to get all my citations from this National Center for Science Education. Let's go with the first one. Evolution may be defined as any net directional change or any cumulative change in the characteristics of organisms or populations over many generations. In other words, descent with modification. Well, we just destroyed that above. Here's some meat on the bone right here. It explicitly includes, listen up, the origin as well as the spread of alleles. That is genes, variants, traits, values, trait values, or characteristic traits. Okay, I don't want to get off this topic too much. We're going to come back to this here in 1 second. I want you to take a look at these last 2 sentences. I'll read them. Evolution may occur as a result of natural selection, genetic drift, or both. The minimum requirements are those for either process, whatever that means. The next sentence, and I colored it differently for you. Natural selection does not necessarily give rise to evolution, and the same is true for genetic drift, from John Endler. Are they contradictions?
Yes.
That's a rhetorical question. You can get back to that. That's not the meat I want. I want this one. Listen to this again. It explicitly includes the origin as well as the spread of alleles or genes or DNA. And what do we hear from evolutionists? Evolution doesn't have anything to do with abiogenesis. Really? That's how they defined it here. Make my day. This is the begging the question fallacy. Where'd you get alleles, genes, DNA naturally? See, this is the key term here, folks. This is a natural theory, colloquial theory. We want it natural. You could start here. Listen closely. Functional DNA, RNA, or proteins never, ever spontaneously form naturally outside of already existing cells from sugars, bases, phosphates, and aminos, respectively. It's physically and chemically impossible. Why? The second law of thermodynamics, folks. That's why. It's called Gibbs free energy. The delta G here is positive. You don't know what you're talking about, people, and they prey on that. So, to refute, please show a functional 30-mer, that's an oligomer, RNA or protein. The proteins, functional proteins, most are 250 amino acids or larger, that form spontaneously, naturally, outside a living cell or organism from sugars, bases, phosphates, aminos, respectively. I need the source cited. And I'm going to tear it to pieces, just to let you know. The smallest functional DNA or genome is a little over 100,000 nucleotides, so that ain't happening. So let's listen to this. Conclusion from the Grand Poobah of Origin of Life Research. The Grand Poobahs here. This is Leslie Orgel and Gerald F. Joyce. We conclude that the direct synthesis of nucleosides or nucleotides from prebiotic precursors in a reasonable yield and unaccompanied by larger amounts of related molecules could not be achieved by presently known chemical reactions. Just told you. Of course, they're not talking about the second law here. They're talking about something else. They're talking about stereoisomerization, but we're not going to go down that road. Do you know the reasons why? Well, I just told you. Of the approximate 50 obstacles precluding the natural spontaneous formation, what are the two elephants in the room? I just gave them to you. Racemization, and the big one, I don't even go there to racemization anymore. I just go to the second law of thermodynamics and stop there. I just drop anchor right there and start flame throwing, because that's all I need to. From Dr. Leslie Orgel, again, his last published words, literally, after more than 50 years of Origin of Life research. From PLOS Biology, however, solutions offered by supporters of geneticists or metabolist scenarios, don't let this throw you, this is genes versus proteins first, that are dependent on if pigs could fly, hypothetical chemistry, are unlikely to help. Yeah, you know why he's saying this, if pigs could fly? Because it has to violate the second law of thermodynamics. That's why. And that's not even the T-Rex in the room just yet. This is. Number two, how did stupid atoms write their own software? This is why I say it all the time. In other words, show ink, paper, and glue molecules offering technical instruction manuals and blueprints. The analogy, the ink, paper, and glue molecules are ribose, nucleobases, and activated phosphates, and the technical instruction manual's DNA. That's just the physical part of it, right? Where's the information at? From Paul Davies. He's part of the Arizona State Origins Project, along with Craig Venter and a couple other knuckleheads. Listen to what he has to say. DNA is not a special life-giving molecule, but a genetic data bank that transmits its information using a mathematical code. Most of the workings of the cell are best described not in terms of material stuff, hardware, but information or software. This is supernatural stuff, folks. Not material, immaterial, supernatural. Trying to make life by mixing chemicals in a test tube is like soldering switches and wires in an attempt to produce Windows 98. It won't work because it addresses the problem at the wrong conceptual level. So they can't get them chemically, and they can't get the information. This is a joke. All right, comments, questions.
Sure. Can I go first? Hope no one minds. So, in terms of the second law of thermodynamics violation that you're describing, at the beginning of quite a few movies that are hinged around evolution, so I'll give you an example. There's a movie called Minions, and the opening sequence is again, like I used in the advert, you've got the typical line of evolution as something gets more and more complex and smarter. And what you're saying is, the opening sequence to that movie where it's got a cell dividing and growing an eye and then crawling out onto the sand and then getting more smart as it gets more evolved, that's a violation of the second law of thermodynamics. You said it.
No.
Okay.
No. This is pre-biologic, before cells. That's what we're talking about here.
Okay. So you're talking about in terms of creating, if you like, the structure of DNA in the first instance. That's a violation of the second law.
Yeah, exactly.
When they show you the beginning of the dawn of time, and they show you a lightning strike.
The soup.
Striking the primordial soup.
Right.
That's the thing that's required. The chemical processes that are required for the formation of these complex proteins aren't energetically favorable. It requires you to power it up.
Now, even if you did power it up, listen.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that was, I think, the point Nathan was getting at.
Yeah, even if you could power it up, it's even worse. If you could throw increased temperatures in there, it's even worse for them because of Gibbs free energy. You have to look at enthalpy and entropy. Any formation of proteins, any nucleosides and nucleotides are delta G positive that are both unfavorable for enthalpy and entropy, meaning that at any temperature, the higher the temperature, the worse it gets for spontaneous formation. So this is a joke. Another thing, they're talking about cells. I'm talking about a single molecule. The most primitive cell has billions of functionally specific complex molecules. I'm telling you one. They can't get one. 30 mer.
Okay, so I'm way ahead of you when I'm talking about a cell then. So you're talking way back, and as Adam puts it, when they describe the primordial soup and they have a lightning strike and just the right chemical balance to create that's total horseshit. That violates the second law.
What happens when you see lightning strike something?
It dries it.
Go ahead, Adam. I'm done.
Betty?
No. I think that's what I thought. Nathan was too far ahead of himself in terms of where we were, and in terms of what's being formed here. This isn't just, like I say, minerals and it's the requirement of complex formation of complex proteins requires input into the system, and the supposition for the beginning of life is, like I say, a lightning bolt, just to get these very small building blocks, not the little bits that are going to be the encoding of DNA. And that was the bit that I got from it, John. Again, what you've got here, it's all very well and good, even if you allow the begging of the question for the structure of sticking your A's, your C's, your G's, all that kind of stuff together. But once again, it always comes back to what's processing that information for it to be allowed to mean anything.
Right. Yeah, John did touch on that. I mean, I was going to hopefully stick on delta G because that still isn't clear to me, if I'm perfectly honest. And I understand how you've explained it to me off air, but if I'm still totally unclear, there's a good chance there's a large portion of the audience that are also unclear. So hopefully we can...
to turn I don't know, wood into charcoal and fire and flames, you have to start igniting it first. You have to put heat in to just get that very, very basic chemical compound reaction. You've got to add energy into the system in a very basic, crude way there. You're setting something on fire. But to start to be able to form these and put together these complex proteins not only requires energy, but it also requires direction. It's not something that really kind of happens randomly. It always, as far as I can see, it always requires a biological system to put it together in the first place for it to exist. Otherwise, they don't exist.
The other thing was specifically about when you said software. So again, we're back to information. check out BALLBUSTERS 6 if you want to look into this further. But again, it's the critical detail here is we're not just talking about, like you put it, charcoal. We're talking about structures that have information in them. So where are you going to get that from in your primordial soup with a lightning bolt?
And it really goes back even more than that, because where everything assumes that the laws of nature, the laws of physics, are intrinsic to nature without any design input. And that's ridiculous, because they had to both come into being at the same time, the laws of physics and the matter they act upon. So nature itself is programmed to react in certain ways. You can have your primordial soup and that it just needs a little spark and off we go. But why? Because it's programmed to react. And that's what you cannot get away from. You can't get away from the fact that there had to have been a system encoded so that things react in certain ways at certain times in certain conditions. They're programmed from start to finish. And you can't have something that doesn't even know physical laws, that doesn't obey them because they haven't existed yet, unless you invoke that these laws are part of just random things smashing together and forming compounds. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and if you consider that in a single cell that there goes on so many processes, so many things go on. There are little machines that John said that were in there, that kinesin, I think that you called it, like a little motor, like a little robot that's in there. And if you see all these things happening there, then it's so complex. How more we can zoom in, the more complex it gets. Not easier to understand, but more complex to understand. So I think that cannot be random. There's no randomness in that. It has to be designed. That's my take on it.
Yeah, you're talking about. Sorry, I was just say you're talking about lightning bolts creating machinery. I mean, it's absurd.
Well, they do that in video games and stuff. I've seen it done.
Go on, Adam.
It was what was just being said there. I kind of alluded to it. We got a little off track last night talking about how deep you can see into a cell optically. But I was kind of hinting that it is that complexity of the cell, and it's not just energy, sugar molecules being transferred around, which is easy to comprehend. Even within the cell, there's a transfer of information. And I'll say it again, for me, on a cellular level, it's easy to comprehend how cells transmit, but how an initial program for what cellular structure meant is the impossibility from zero for me. It's perfectly sensible that with a well-written code, cells can develop and improve, and that would be the mark of a good programmer. But all of those require a programmer first for even these complex proteins, if you allow them to be formed, to mean something.
Right, back to information. Any more? Should we move on? Right, John, got you back up.
All right, one of my favorites to take the flamethrower to. I just sit back and wait for a little frequency change. Anybody that parrots this, they're in for a world of hurt. I got the nail spike 44-inch Louisville Slugger just waiting for him. So we're back to, and this comes from the National Science Education. Let me get that right. National Center for Science Education. Is that it? That's the big one here in the United States. Oh, way I passed it. Sorry about that. I just want to make sure I got it correct. So the National Center for Science Education, like I said, all of these definitions are coming from them. So allele frequency change, all three of these come from the same source. Population geneticists use a different definition of evolution: a change in allele frequencies among generations. 2A, evolution can be, precisely defined. That's what I'm looking for. As any change in frequency of alleles within a gene pool from one generation to the next. Then 2b, the allele frequency definition of evolution has survived to become the standard definition in textbooks and discussions about evolution. So I think we finally found it, right?
See, I've got a butt in here, John.
Hey, wait a second. Hold on. I'll stop at the end of this. In the very same article, now we're talking about allele frequency change. We're headed back to Ernst Mayr. Like I said, Professor Emeritus, Museum Comparative Zoology at Harvard University. Ernst Mayr, the world's greatest living evolutionary biologist. Stephen Jay Gould. This is in the same paper, by the way. This is in the same source as these definitions, which is belly laughing hilarious. Listen to what he has to say. I pointed out more than a decade ago, 1977, that the reductionist explanation so widely adopted in recent decades, evolution is a change in gene frequency of populations, is not only not explanatory, but is in fact misleading. It's a fraud. And again, in the very same article, listen to this, folks. The allele frequency definition, if adequate, the standard definition from above, the most precise definition from above, the allele frequency definition, if adequate, would leave us unsatisfied that evolution really had been explained. Geneticists have observed in small scale a general resistance of the molecular components of the genome to change from the norm or wild type. For this reason, if any biologist were to be anti-evolutionist, it would typically be one who works at the molecular level, such as a molecular geneticist or biochemist. Hi there, pretender clown muppets. I got you by the friggin' short hairs. And psst, I'm never letting go. Questions, comments?
Go on, Adam.
No.
Don't be scared.
No, because you did it afterwards when I interrupted. I naively thought I was going to... Just that whole definition, if you scroll back up to it, is just shocking. Precisely defined as a change in frequency in a gene pool. It just shocks of anything you want it to be. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have any inference. It is just totally wishy-washy and smacks of a best guess. Do you know what I mean? Oh, it's got something to do with this. So we will stick this definition on it. But in of itself, it doesn't even necessarily imply evolution as you would understand it from the mainstream definition. It's actually just suggesting a change in the frequency of changing the frequency of certain genes being expressed in a population.
No, what they're trying to do, you see, change in allele frequency. What we're talking about here is, change in eye color, different blood types, change in hair color, earlobes, attached and not detached. See, they use that to grease the skids. They say, well, that's evolution. They use that to grease the skids that everyone knows. Any moron at the beginning of time knows, right? That you can just observe, 3 generations of a family of squirrels and see that there's some changes, right? So they use that as their definition of evolution to now state that you can get friggin' giraffes from bacteria.
So this to me comes back, John, to possibly a bit of the epigenetics that we were talking about, because they're going to respond to certain situations, whatever it is. Epigenetic changes, sure, if you're thinking about a cow being able to gorge more and their stomachs get bigger, etc., and all the knock-ons, it'd be that kind of change that is knocking on to this, that they're then trying to put causation of real change, when it's just, like today say, a well-written program which improves itself, and particularly over time can make improvement modifications from the beginning. So a cow wouldn't need necessarily to have overgorging and stomach distension to be born with slightly larger structure. Do you know what I mean? To me,
Yeah.
that level of change is within and demonstrated within there. But again, it's all fine tuning and, more important, fine response to environment that's been already given and already pre-programmed into. And this is the genius of, for me, the DNA code, and what it does is it does pass on information from one organism into the next based on the environmental experience. I think that's demonstrated. I think that's what this kind of stuff is, that genius of the program that's been trying to be passed off as the supposition that fishes can run.
Yeah, but Ernst Mayr, like I said, we don't have to go down. We don't have to chase those trails, right? The king evolutionary biologist said it was horseshit. So let's just leave it, stay where it lays.
Paula, Betty?
Nothing to add.
No, not really.
Outstanding. Can we move on?
Yeah, ready when you are.
Okay, number 3. This is a joke. Evolution, this is the next definition. Evolution is a directional and essentially irreversible process occurring in time. From Julian Huxley and Newman. That's why we love you. Your meticulous attention to excruciating detail, folks. OCD-like. Every friggin' thing is directional and essentially an irreversible process occurring in time. What's it called? It's not rhetorical. What's this called? It's right here. Come on, give it to me. Not a rhetorical. Go ahead, panel. No? Entropy. You guys weren't maybe getting something to eat or something. I got you. I usually go on a rant. That's all it is. I mean, everyone already knows this. This isn't anything special, for crying out loud. Friggin' clowns. I'm not going to stop here. So the next one, number 4, is I? Who the heck is, I should have kept that up. Who the heck is I? I take the broadest definition, okay? Let's see if we got an I in here. So this is, like I said, this is from this document. I'm looking for an author here, to get this nameless, faceless I. I've read through this document many times. I may have missed it. I'll tell you what, it's usually at the beginning, right? Or what's the other place? Probably at the end, correct? Topics evolution, none gives the address. I don't know where it is. I went to the acknowledgements. Where are they? Acknowledgement. I'm trying to find. He didn't acknowledge himself, obviously. Nope. So this nameless, faceless I prefers the broadest definition of evolution. Here we go again, right? The descent with modification. We already clobbered this thing into the incoherent oblivion above, right? And he also gives a slightly narrow concept. So we got descent with modification and common ancestry again, right? So this is one of those times. This is another definition. This is not from the National Center for Science Education. This is from the University of Evolution, the University of Berkeley. Any citations that I've received over the years, because I don't get citations. These evolutionists never cited anything. But when I do, when the rare time that I do, it's always from these knuckleheads. Let's listen to this. We've defined evolution as descent with modification from a common ancestor, right? Descent with modification, common ancestor, number 4 and 5 above. But exactly what has been modified? Evolution only occurs when there's a change in gene frequency within a population over time. Well, okay. Do I need to go through this again? From Professor Ernst Mayr saying it's not explanatory, it's misleading, your gene frequency nonsense, right? From the paper itself, it's unsatisfied. Allele frequency leaves us unsatisfied. Any molecular geneticist or biochemist laughs at this, right? This is a cluster gaggle, folks, right? The universal common descent of the tree of life. We already went through this. All this nonsensical buffoonery, along with, for example, chromosome 2 fusion, which I pummeled in the P.Z. Myers presentation. Of course, he never responded to that. He's not as dumb as he looks. It's just another fiasco in the never-ending post-hoc observation parade of repackaged evolutionary fallacies. You know, vestigial structures. These people crack me up with these vestigial structures. You can tell right away they never came within 1,000 miles of an A&P course, right? And they're commenting on vestigial structures. I just laugh at them, just pummel them. Junk DNA, that blew up in their face. Ring species, fossils, punctuated equilibrium. This is non-change change, by the way. Piltdown man, Lenski's E. coli. Yeah, I'm still laughing, by the way. Go ahead and bring that up to me. I triple dog dare you to establish universal common descent or the tree of life. We already been through this, right? We already been through that it's a begging the question fallacy, formal logical fallacy, also affirming the consequent. I'm not going to do it again. We already been through Dr. Craig Venter's take on the phylogenetic tree of life, right? There's not a tree of life, no tree of life. He's telling you, but you don't listen. You're not reading. You just parrot this stuff. I'll hear this tomorrow. Guaranteed. Right? So I'm going to stop here. The next definition is number 6. So we'll go ahead and stop here. Any questions, comments?
No, I will say that there is a link, though. If people want to challenge any of the stuff that's being said here, you can actually join on the Discord server. So if you joined before the show started, you'll have to refresh the page. But if not, you should just be able to open up the info box, and round about at the bottom somewhere there should be a link to join via the Discord server. So shortly we'll open up the mics, and if you want to add your opinions, you can feel free to do so. Should we start with Paula?
Yeah, I was waiting for punctuated equilibrium to come up because also known as the hopeful monster theory.
Right. Yeah, I gave way to you on that one, but I'm smiling. You put it at first. That was the thing I was going to bring up, but I was being courteous and started with the panel. But you go ahead.
Yeah, it was Stephen Jay Gould is basically grasping at straws with that because evolution has always been anchored in uniformitarianism and always going from simple to complex, which is a just so story in itself. But they couldn't deal with the fact that there are no transitional fossils to speak of. And so they said, well, sometimes every now and then evolution goes really fast, so it doesn't leave fossils. And the reason we come up with suddenly, we have this certain stage of evolution, and then suddenly it changes with no transition. Oh, it must be punctuated equilibrium, meaning all of a sudden it's sped up and a chicken laid an egg and out popped a frog, and that's what they think explains what Stephen Jay Gould tried to come up with to explain the lack of transitional fossils and to account for the fact that uniformitarianism is impossible the more we learn about the complexity of life and the interdependence of systems, the irreducible complexity not only within an organism, but also between organisms such as flowers and bees that have to have evolved in perfect synchronization for billions of years in order to get where they were in tandem because they depend on each other. And so he makes up these ridiculous theories to try to get over those humps, or they'll have I've heard of the jumping gene theory, where somehow rogue bits of DNA get away from the organism to smash into another one. And voila, there's evolution. It's just sheer desperation. It's laughable.
I think before the show also started rolling, we talked a little bit about living fossils.
Yes, a classic oxymoron.
Do you want to expand on it and just explain what a living fossil is first? If not, I will, but I'd rather you did.
Well, I think that was the coelacanth that I mentioned that they had found in the fossil record and prints of it and said, see, this is a transition. It's got some extra fins and things on it, and it's going from this simple fish to this more complex whatever. And then they started catching them in the sea alive. And so they made up the term living fossil, which is an oxymoron because it's either a fossil that's extinct because it's showing you life that superseded other life over slow eons of time, or these things could all have lived at the same time the way they do now. We have coelacanths right now with much more quote unquote complex evolved creatures all at the same time and not in a sequence.
Yeah, I was going to say in that the point that it was supposed to be one of the sequential species on a path to more refined fish. It was passed off as that, and therefore when it does pop up in South Indian Ocean and people start pulling them over boats and they realise they're worth a few quid, they suddenly realise they're all over the place. Because it's not until the first one gets discovered that suddenly all these poor Indian fishermen that have this big fish that tastes like shit, suddenly it's worth a load. So suddenly loads of them start popping up, and it's just truth that this sequential chain of evolution is bunkum. Crocodiles and alligators were the one that always confused me as a kid.
That's what I was going to come on to.
Sorry.
But no, I don't want to steal the panel's thunder. This is just a good bit of the show, right? So you carry on.
The one as a little boy, when I had my little Ladybird book of dinosaurs, you always had the most basic of creatures. The little, well, you had the spazzy fish, didn't you, with little arms coming out, and after that, you've got your alligators and crocodiles, and then you get your more complex dinosaur paraphernalia. After that, again spazzy armed T-Rexes. But it was the placement of those that actually somehow they appear in the fossil record all the way through, yet they haven't changed at all, which just seems a little odd to me.
It seems almost like they deliberately work it into a lot of mainstream narratives as well. They'll almost overemphasize the fact that they're living fossils, so that it's normalized. You know, it's an awkward stumbling block in reality for this nonsense, but they'll just over normalize it by talking about it a lot. It seems to me, especially with crocodiles.
They do that with sharks too, that these are so primitive, and they just make the stuff up as they go along. But another thing I wanted to mention real quick is the viable blood cells in dinosaur bones that they found that is supposedly very ancient rock, that these things should have solidified and petrified eons ago, but they're not. And the lady, I forget her name, Schweitzer? Yeah. Marilyn Schweitzer or somebody like that.
I did a whole presentation on this.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, she caught an awful lot of grief for being a scientist, and saying, look, these are actual blood cells. I did my experiments properly. I did my, procedures and didn't get contamination. And they just, vilified her for reaching a scientific conclusion over it. And because of their religious zealotry to defend this unfalsifiable theory of evolution above all costs.
There were follow-up ones, not just the blood cells. There was lots where they took what they thought was other older stuff and just dissolved the mineral content of the bones, and there was still collagen fibers existing within the bones, which again contradicts the supposed timeline of millions of years for these things. It was still elastic. There was still gel structure to it. What was left once this slowly dissolved, all the mineral content was still some, just like with the T-Rex plus, some biological material.
We may run that presentation on here. We haven't talked about that yet, but we could talk about that one, Nathan.
You might, but the BBC buried it. If you try and search, it was all over the BBC when it first came out and really interesting.
No, I got Dr. Mary Schweitzer on the Non-Sec show back in the day.
Yeah. No, what I mean is it's interesting the BBC have got rid of that rather groundbreaking clip themselves. It's
oh, yeah. Well, what else are they going to do?
Yeah.
We could talk about that.
I actually reran it on this channel. I'm going to go and get a link for it right now and put it into the show so people can have it. But I would be more than happy to do that again. I think I replayed the one that you did with cathexis.
Yeah, that's correct. I did one against Dr. Mary Schweitzer and the other one against P.Z. Myers.
Yeah, I think I might have mirrored both of them, but I'm putting the Schweitzer one in now. I'll just do a quick shout out. Thank you very much, AV Rabbit, for the super chat. Really appreciate your support. Yeah, I've stuck it in the chat, so if you want to go and check it out, I've put a link there for you to go to now if you're in the audience live.
All right, we're going to move on.
I think so, unless Paula or Betty have got anything else to add.
No, nothing.
Nope.
Yeah, you're on. Ready when you are.
Okay, narrower still, number 6, biological evolution. This is going to be quick. Is a change of the properties of populations of organisms that transcend the lifetime of a single individual. The ontogeny of an individual is not considered evolution. Individual organisms do not evolve. Whatever that is. We haven't figured that out yet. The changes in populations that are considered evolutionary are those that are inheritable via the genetic material from one generation to the next. Biological evolution may be slight or substantial. It embraces everything from slight changes in the portion of what? Different alleles within a population, such as determining blood types, like we already talked about, to the successive alterations that led from the earliest proto-organisms to snails, bees, giraffes, and dandelions. This is from Fudayama. So we already been over allele frequency change. I don't think we need to talk to it again. And this is just the fairy tale phylogenetic tree of life again, or common descent. So I'm not going to go over those things again. I did it twice above. I think you get the gist. Okay, on to Betty's topic. Remember, she brought up predictions, right? So this was Carol V. Ward, paleoanthropologist from the University of Missouri, just up the street from me here, in Experts Tackle Questions of How Humans Will Evolve. And this is from Scientific American. Listen to this closely, folks. You ready? Evolution is not a process that allows us to predict what will happen in the future. We can see what happened in the past only. Is this clear? Right? What I want you guys to do, if you disagree with her, I got her email address right here. Ward, capital C as in Charlie, V as in Victor, at missouri.edu. Just go ahead and email her, or you can call her up, 573-882-0558. That's in her office for further clarification. If you do, can you put the substance of this discussion, can you write it up? I'd like to hear it. And I'd like to see the hypothesis. You know, scientific predictions are hypotheses, scientific hypotheses. So to have a scientific prediction, you got to have a hypothesis. Okay? I want to see the hypothesis. So crocheting is more scientific than evolution. This is one of my favorites right here. Let's take it. I'm going to circle back on this. Let me just read through it. This is Franklin Harold, Professor Emeritus Biochemistry at Colorado State University. You know, I should see my wife graduated from Colorado State University. I should ask her if she knew him. I'm going to do it. After the show, I'll do it. The Way of the Cell, Molecules, Organisms, and the Order of Life from Oxford University Press. Listen to this. We should reject, as a matter of principle, the substitution of intelligent design for the dialogue of chance and necessity. We must concede that there are presently no detailed Darwinian accounts of the evolution of any biochemical or cellular system, only a variety of wishful speculations. I mean, my word, people. He's telling you straight up. This is the one that I already knew all this. This is the one that stood out to me. We should reject that just as a matter of principle. A priori, just hand wave dismiss right out of hand intelligent design. Nope. Can't have any of that. We don't want to see that. We're going to close our eyes, stick our fingers in our ears, la, 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 right? That's what he's talking about here. This is a joke. In conclusion, the most scientifically validated theory in the history of man, evolution, has no science in it whatso friggin' ever. None. It can't even be defined. It has more definition than Babe Ruth has home runs, making it, at the very best, a clumsy shape-shifting equivocation fallacy. That's it. That's all you got. Thanks for your ear. Have a nice day.
Cool. Nice presentation, John. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
There is a link, so if you do want to join during the next, I don't know, 10 minutes while we round out the show, you can challenge us, and the way to do so is click the link in the Discord server, to get into the Discord server, I should say. As such, there is nobody in there at the moment, as far as I can see, so undoubtedly the Peanut Gallery will get in touch after the fact, even though there's a couple of hundred people almost watching. Any finishing comments? We might not get anybody challenging you at all today, John, you never know.
Oh, that'll be too bad.
Betty.
Yeah, I thought about the predictions. The predictions that they allude to are the ones, I think, that are also lie in history, right? In these fossil geographic situations in fossils. They never predict what we are going to look like in the future, but they always predict in hindsight of things. So it's funny.
Is that a scientific prediction?
No. I remember that I once made a comment underneath one of Aaron Ra's videos, because he said that evolution used the scientific method, and he went all about it. And I asked him your questions that you set up above, I think. What's evolution? And all post two scientific experiments and stuff. And he only gave me the bit of the allele frequencies, I remember. And he never gave me two examples. And then all these other people that went over this video commented on me and just trying to see what kind of person I was, because I was dishonest for asking them these questions, and it was all clear what I was on about. And they even went to my channel to see what kind of other videos I had up, and so it seems to me that these people don't look at this honestly. They just want to have a sort of a priest to follow and not be really skeptical about it. That's what I got from it. And he never gave me two scientific the scientific method of any example. So it was a kind of a tell.
Did he post a scientific theory?
Yeah, it was a short thing that it came down to what you already said.
Oh, the allele frequency change. You already said that. Sorry about that. Yep.
Yeah. That's the only thing that he came up with. And when I asked more of these questions, and other people came, and they never clarified it for me. I just got attacked basically because if I was that critical, then I should read this and read that, and they elephant hurl you with all these papers and documents, and it never gives you any experiments that they did. They don't give you anything of the scientific method.
Right. They ad hom you and then go see who you're subscribed to, and then make fun of your favorite color. Yeah.
And then you're Fundy Zealot or whatever. That's so funny.
Yeah, that's really mature.
Yeah.
Great arguments. They probably went to Stanford Law. Clowns.
Yeah.
Shout out to Yuya for smashing the super chat. Thank you very much indeed for your support. Still nobody in the Discord server. Nobody going to challenge anything that's been said. If you want to, click the link in the info box below the video. Paula, this might be your closing statement. We shall see.
I think shape-shifting is really the root or overall summary of the whole thing, because people like to say they take pride in the fact that science is always changing. Well, that applies to discoveries. It does not apply to just those stories. You can't keep changing your just so story because you can't falsify it and then think that this is somehow an improvement and that science is marching forward, because it isn't. It's often, like anything else in history, is 2 steps forward, 1 step back at best, and gained and lost civilizations and recovering. It's a cycle. It's not a progression as uniformitarian wants it to be. And so when they say that this theory can't be pinned down, well, yeah, that's why it's unfalsifiable and why it isn't even a scientific theory and why it's just a just so story and why anybody should believe it is beyond me. And the tell, to use John's term there, is that they are religiously defending this like you insulted their mother if you disagree with it, in spite of the fact that they're proud that it changes all the time. If it changes all the time, then what is scientific truth today will be a laughingstock tomorrow. So why do they get so upset if you don't believe what they currently believe today? It's the tell, because if they know it's going to change, why do they invest so much emotional energy into it and get upset if you don't agree with them? It's the indication that they know this is just a story and they like their story. And they don't like it if you don't believe their story.
Adam?
Yeah, John, can you just scroll down to Professor Franklin for me? I'd just state that. I think that's fantastic. We should reject, as a matter of principle, the substitution of intelligent design or the dialogue of chance and necessity. We must concede there are presently no detailed Darwinian accounts of evolution of any biochemical or cellular system. And that's, the important bit for me, that on the most fundamental levels, we've not spotted anything. The things that led to all of that, and I've quite enjoyed, John. You took us through quite a nice bit of detail on all of those processes, and yeah, great presentation, mate. Thanks. I enjoyed it.
You're welcome.
Cool. There was some hint that the Discord link might have been broken, but I put a new one out there, so we'll give it maybe another minute or so. If nobody joins, we'll round out, and we might get some people chatting to us about random subjects in the after show. So I know in the last Ballbusters we were quite explicit to say no, we don't want to discuss flat Earth and such. However, if somebody did want to join after we've rounded out and we end up discussing random subjects, that's absolutely fine. You'll just have to tune into that. And the after show in Nathan Oakley channel, subscribe below. So yeah, I agree. Absolutely great presentation. Really, really enjoyed it. Very, very succinct. As concise as you can be in this convoluted mess of nonsense that is evolution.
Yeah, you got to tear away from the background noise and just go with the questions. I mean, if you ever any discussions like that, just use those questions. Is my screen still up? Maybe I could put those.
Yeah.
Go back up there. Just these questions right here. That's all you need. They'll be flummoxed. And like I said, you can't get the 3 and 4. That's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to overwhelm you. They're not going to give you any experiments, right? They're going to give you the whole bunch of just so stories. Evolution, whether it be homology, vestigial structures, they're going to go with peeled down. There's thousands of them, right? That's what they're going to try to do, but don't let them do that. See, when you're trying to prove something, you must first define that which you're trying to prove. And in science, before you come up with a scientific theory, you have to be able to define it. I know it's shocking. And to have a scientific thing, you can't give anything without the scientific theory. You need these guys first. So it's a cluster gaggle. Don't let them go. I gave you all the answers you need in this presentation to just pummel any answer they have here. So I hope you use them.
Hey, John, one more thing.
Sure.
Vestigial. Vestigial.
Vestigial.
From the word vestige.
Yeah, these people, they crack me up. They've never gotten within 1,000 miles of an A&P course, right?
Yeah.
Adam, you know what I'm talking about.
I I always say to my students that I'm training, when they say, "Well, how do you pronounce this word? How do you say that?" I say it with confidence and move on. And it's very rare you'll get picked up.
No, they've never been with an A&P course, anatomy and physiology. I mean, this stuff that they bring up, it's so old. It's like 40 or 50 years old, the stuff that they're parroting. It's a joke. I was sitting there when I first, when I first got into this genre, I'm listening to them talking about the structure, and I'm saying, are you people insane? Are you just making stuff up? Because any anatomy and physiology course, they'd be laughing at you. So, hey, give me hey, Nathan, give me a minute. I'll be back in about a minute. Okay.
Oh, I'm going to round out the live show. Sure.
You gonna round it out now?
Well, yeah, we're going to have an after show. This is my opportunity to say, if you're watching this on the Nathan Oakley, not 1980, just the Nathan Oakley stream, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. However, a massive, huge, enormous thank you to all of the live audience in Nathan Oakley 1980 for tuning in, smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, and all that good stuff. Of course, a massive thank you to Paula, Betty, Adam, and Quantum Eraser for making this Ballbusters possible. I've been Nathan Oakley. If you need to keep yourself occupied after the live stream is over, go to nathanoakley.com and check out the Flat Earth Debate Forum. I'll see you in the next Ballbusters.